General Poppas serves as the Commanding General of Forces Command. He has served in a variety of command and staff assignments throughout his 34-year military career and is commander of the U.S. Army's largest organization with 216,000 active component soldiers and 190,000 members of the U.S. Army Reserve, while also providing training and readiness oversight to the Army National Guard. Command Sergeant Major Sims has served in every leadership position from squad leader to Command Sergeant Major over his 34 years in military service with combat and operational deployments to Kuwait, Iraq, Kosovo, and Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present General Poppas and Command Sergeant Major Sims.
Wow. Good to see you. Well, I appreciate that. Oh, yeah.
We on?
Can you hear me out there, Larry? Good. Hey, well, I appreciate it. First, but to you, Curtis, thanks for putting together this whole forum talking about maneuver in the fight. I mean, having these professional discussions, and you can take a look, just look left and right. You know, I see staff sergeants, sergeant first classes, lieutenants, captains, all the way up to the division, corps commanders that are part of this up through FORSCOM. Ed, thanks for being here. AMC's here. You just had TRADOC up there. It just shows, oh, you can't hear me? All right. But these are the forums that we have to talk about our profession. And they're absolutely important, and it's a great forum. And you see the Secretary of the Army herself come in here and start to give you her vision of the future fight. And then us starting to articulate what it's going to take to win in that multi-domain future fight. I mean, that's great. Then the chairman comes in, the chief, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, and they start to get you to a level of granularity tied in with C.D. Donahue. Here's the fight in the Ukraine. What lessons are we pulling, and how are we going to apply those both to our training methodology and then to our fighting methodology and the doctrine it's going to have to follow in order to win that future fight. TRADOC tied in. And I agree with Gary 100%. That's your foundational entity of the soldiers that are going to populate our formations. And then TRADOC. That's, well, TRADOC, then FORSCOM, where we're going to come in to make sure that we have that trained and ready force. And we're going to hit upon that. And one of the key things, though, that I think underpins it all, and it's important in this formation, as I look, again, from the staff sergeant, the squad leaders, all the way up through the commanders at echelon, and it's the word engaged leadership. I'm going to touch upon that because we have to focus on the individual. The Army is a people organization, and it's the human dynamic that changes the way in which we fight. Those are some of the intangibles of the war. When I talk about engaged leadership, it's that human-to-human contact. It's understanding the individual. It's understanding what their desires are, their strengths, their weaknesses, and how to complement that within your own formation in order to do that. And I know it works. I've seen it. The mentor I learned it from when I was a young captain with a full head of hair is in the audience today, Colonel G.D. Dorman, then Major Dorman, who brought me in. And I appreciate it. G.D., where are you at? Colonel Dorman, sir. There he is in the back. He should be in the front row because that's a living example of what leadership is. And as a young captain, I saw that when he took me in, and you start about inculcating an approach to leadership, understanding the individual, and it permeated our whole formation. That's where it's at. And I learned that, and I've seen it. I've seen it in execution, too. I'm looking at Johnny Carson right there as a company commander. I've seen it, Sergeant Major Reap. I've seen it in all the formations, Sergeant Major Wilson. When you get out there and you have that person-to-person contact, and you understand who they are, lieutenants and sergeant majors and NCOs, I'm looking at you. Because that starts at 0630 every morning, PT formation. When you stand in formation, you look down the line, if you're that team leader, you should know everything about those individuals in your squad. And you should be able to tell the dynamic change if the night before that soldier had a bad night, they had a good night. What is it? You should know about their family. You should know where they live and have been there. You want to know where they live. Take the time to do that. We've migrated away from that a little bit, and I got it. During COVID, we often took accountability by text because we couldn't get together, mandated. Sometimes PT was on your own. Tell me what you did. By text, I get it. Now, I'm not broken, but we've got to get back to that human-to-human contact, and there's an element that's out there that isn't accustomed to that. I see it, though. Now that I move back down to Bragg, I see it every morning. I see it within the formations that constitute all the elements on Bragg. PT formation, I'm out there and I'm watching it, and I love it. And then when it's time at 6:30, you know that, and you do your right face, and you step off, whatever echelon you're doing PT at, you got to be out there leading it. Because that's what leaders do. And I got it, you can be broke, but over a period of time, if you do right face and you're a leader and you're not leading that PT and you step away, someone else does it, I don't need you. Someone else needs to fill that role because you've got to be out there. Physical presence is important. And that's that echelon. As you start to move up, the company, your battalion, your brigade. For me, my echelon of my contacts, it's the corps commanders, of course, sergeant majors. Now, we're not going to get together and do PT anymore, sergeant major, and do a right face where I get to look at you. But I got to have those point-to-point contacts. I got to still know what it is, what desires that he has, what are the strengths, what issues are there, so that we can help complement and make sure that we help him attain those. That's what I talk about engaged leadership. And if we've got that foundation, it builds trust in the formation up and down the chain. Up and down the chain. So that's why I love that this forum's got, I see the E6s, the 7s, the lieutenants, because you're going to own those formations. And I expect you to be out there leading them and driving them. And you look at your NCO and you do that together. That's what I want to start seeing. That's what I want to see throughout the entire formation and what we got to get back to. You're empowered to do that. And you hit the people first portion. You heard the chief here yesterday when people first came out. Now, how do you define it? Part of that definition when I talk to Sergeant Major, it's who do you talk to? You know, when I talk to General Calvert, he knows people first at that echelon. It's about making sure the formation's ready. People first, I make sure that they're fully trained, that they're resourced, that they have everything they need, expertly led to go to the next fight. But when you migrate down the formation a little bit, people first starts to be about my favorite ranger, me. People first is my free time. You know, when I show up for work and when I leave, that's my soldier time. After that, that's me time. It's not. Leadership is 24/7. You're a soldier 24/7, and part of that expectation for us on people first is we're being predictive in our calendars, we're being predictive in the requirements, so that we're not calling them at night for something that starts 6:30, that we're predictive in that. That's what we owe them. But we also owe them if something does come up that's emerging, I am picking up that phone. Because you're a soldier 24/7, that's the expectation. That's my thing about engaged leadership. It's out there, we're not broken, but we got to drive the institution to get there. And the drivers of that are right here in this room.
Sir, everybody hear me? How's everybody doing?
Give you the one that works.
Oh, hey, where is my Ranger buddy from 124? Are you in this room? Sergeant First Class. Maybe he's not. Huh? Where you at? Come here. Get up here. We're going to talk about engaged leadership, right? So this young man remembers me from when I was a battalion sergeant major. He said, "Sergeant Major, do you still run?" I was like, "Heck yeah, I still run." And you know, it's just a testament of you know, what I think about, like, what's your influence on soldiers. This young man's a Sergeant First Class, Ranger qualified, at 6-star TB, doing great things. And, you know, I'm going to give you a coin for being awesome and staying in the Army.
Yeah.
All right. But so about being engaged, I think all the way back to when I was a first sergeant in Bravo 126. My first company commander was Captain Andy Rockefeller. I think he's a retired colonel now. But how could I make a difference for the organization in combat? Now, I was a mortar platoon sergeant growing up, and then I'm thrust into this position as a first sergeant in one of the worst areas in Iraq, Samarra. Great place, lovely times. But you know, that pivotal moment was when the company commander, Captain Andy Rockefeller, sat me down and said, "First Sergeant, I need you to do this for the company. I need you to go out and spend time with the platoons. I need you to go on patrols with the platoons. I need you to take care of them." Roger that, sir. I executed and moved out. So being engaged always take the opportunity. I'm looking at the company commanders, soon to be company commanders right now. Always take the opportunity to spend time with your soldiers, always. That's from PT. That's from, you know, just walk around and talking to them. Ensure that you engage with the families, bring the families in. All right, I mean, it's so important, the jobs that you guys are getting ready to go into. And it's going to take those guys over there, all those Sergeant First Classes, future First Sergeants, to team up with you to execute that and make things happen. But being engaged is so important. And, you know, that's why I'm sitting right here right now as the FORSCOM Sergeant Major, because when he was my division commander, he told me, "Sergeant Major, I need you to get out and spend time with the soldiers." Was that it? Like leave the division headquarters, run 7 miles, 8 miles, but I would go and pick up I call it little group of paratroopers now because I'm at Fort Bragg, but I'd go pick up little group of air assault soldiers that were doing the wrong thing and making run with me the whole freaking route. And Sergeant Major Burgoyne remembers it because, like, hey, Mondays or Fridays, make sure you're doing the right thing because the division sergeant major's out and about. All right, so, you know, being engaged, always present. I mean, people are looking at you every day. I'm looking at the company commanders again, future company commanders. People are looking at you every day and expecting you to live up to that expectation, and especially from the great training that you're getting right here at Fort Benning, Georgia. Cool? All right.
And PT time's not the time to catch up on admin. They got to see you. And the
That's
worse
right.
the weather, the more important it is. And I know it because I look at Pat when we were flying over to the 18 hours into Indonesia, even in the air, the C-17, he was doing PT every day. And that's the example you set because people are looking. And if it's rainy, if it's cold, you got to get out there. And you got to run that route. And I got it if you're a power lifter, or if you go do something special and there's a gym elsewhere to do it, that's your time. As a leader, your job is to be out there in front of people, setting the example every day. But it's happening. Again, we're not broken. I do want to hit the next piece because one of the things you see, you heard it from the chief. The Army exists to fight and win our nation's wars. You've heard that. He's beaten that drum. And it is. That's why we exist. For FORSCOM, we have to make sure that when called, that we are providing fully trained, expertly led, and disciplined formations for those COCOMs to employ. That's our role and responsibility. And that's our job as we train to get those formations ready. Now, I'll tell you, there's a diversity of threats that are out there, and it's changed. I look back when I graduated from the academy, and I remember the wall was still up. And I wanted to go airborne because I wanted to jump into Moscow. I wanted to be the one to ring the bell of victory. Then the wall collapsed and the Soviet Union went away. 20 years of continuous conflict that we've been to, the rotations we had in Iraq and Afghanistan. At battalion, brigade, even division command, if those are in the formation, you know, look at Johnny and Sergeant Major Reap and others, they heard me. I'd step in, hey, our future is written. We had a patch chart. I knew we were going to Saladin province. I knew that we were going to go and we're going to win Nangarhar. And you built up a training methodology to go there. You did a PDSS. You had everything you needed to know to fight and win that fight. That was the predictability he had. We don't have that. We don't have that level of predictability. And through that diverse requirements that we have, you can see the demand continuing to build. You see the demand coming out of the combatant commanders because of the requirements that they have in their AOR that's increasing the requirement for Army forces. Indo-PACOM, the challenge that they're having competition. The Ukraine, you had CD up there. Just go back to last October to the formation that we have here. How many more are over there that weren't predicted in the 2-year model that you have? We didn't see that coming, but we have to be prepared. You have to be ready. And again, that starts at the lowest echelon, and we're going to talk about where we're going to focus in a moment, but you got to continue to prepare for the fight that you're going to have. And that means you have to be masters of the fundamentals. Then you can apply that mastery to any fight that you have.
Hey, so how does FORSCOM get after it? We're the largest land-based command, right? So 745,000 people. That's three corps, 9 divisions, and 25 brigade combat teams, and plus all our enablers. And, you know, I think about 1st Army, I see the COG from JRTC here, NTC, all the things we have to do in order for us to train, equip, man, and make ready for the combatant commanders. So, I mean, large command, a lot of things to do. I think everybody in this room will probably end up in a FORSCOM unit at one time or another, but it's very busy. The op tempo is pretty high. You know, two armored brigade combat teams in Europe, 1 infantry brigade combat team in Europe, and then a Stryker brigade getting ready to go into Korea. So it's a constant churn. But as you think about coming out and coming to a FORSCOM unit, it's up to the NCOs over here. It's up to these company commanders over here. And I think I got our IBOLIC and ABOLIC students up top. It's up to you guys to build that readiness. And I charge you as you go out to ensure, you know, the company commanders, that your non-commissioned officers are executing the mission and doing what your intent is. And then the non-commissioned officers, I expect you to actually lead and do what you're supposed to do. And don't try to hide from the hard job, because we need everybody that's in this room to execute, so that way we can build the readiness for our combatant commanders. Back to you, sir.
Well, thanks, Sergeant Major. And the key to that, I'm stealing Sergeant Major Wilson, the old strike motto. When you walk away and you in front of your formation, the one thing you've got to have, our mantra's got to be, we fight where we're told and we win where we fight. If you take that methodology and that's your dogma in your formation, you're always going to drive it to success. And then a couple portions, if I go to the next slide, and just the button here. So what does that look like? Not only just give you a view from the FORSCOM and some of the training guidance that's going to come forth. Again, first 90 days of assessment. Over the past 3 years, my predecessor, General Garrett, as he looked at the formation as he came in, and we looked through our CTCs, what we found is we continued to train, but we weren't masters at the lower echelon. When we had our first contact at either the training centers or any of the training centers, or even our own, we were finding that the platoons weren't winning the fight. And what we realized is, as we were looking to get to the CTCs and some of the gated trainings, we had to get through company live fires. You had to do a battalion live fire, in some cases up to brigade. But to get to the level of mastery at those higher echelons, we moved too quick from the lower echelons. Or we didn't take into account that every quarter you get a good 30% new people and gone back and retrained. So when they made contact, we weren't executing. So the guidance of FORSCOM changed, rightly so. Foundational readiness. And the focus at the 4-star level was at that squad and platoon. And you've seen it driven. And now when you get to the CTCs and you see it in your formations and you see it with the squad leaders, platoon sergeants, platoon leaders, when we're making contact, we're developing that contact and we're dominating the first fight. And that's great. And we're not going to change off that. We're not going to change because we have to be able to do that, and that's what we owe every soldier at echelon to be able to do, to win that fight. But what we've also seen, though, is a little bit of atrophy when you start moving up echelon. So we're focused on that first fight in the planning. But after the first fight, what we're not doing, and it's at the battalion and the brigade, and we're not doing as well, is looking at those transitions, setting the conditions for the future fight. So as such, we're slower in the transition. We're giving the enemy the opportunity. We're not exploiting the advantage. So as we're going to maintain that foundational mastery, we're going to start to focus at the battalion. And the battalions are doing well, but the battalions are outrunning the brigades. And if we're outrunning the brigades, then you're starting to look at how do you bring together and synchronize all those warfighting functions to set the condition for the future fight. So when that platoon is engaged, you've actually set the conditions where they might not have to, because you've reduced them, you've destroyed them, and they can continue to move to a next objective. But if you're not being predictive as a staff in synchronizing warfighting functions, you're not going to meet that success. So as we start to migrate to where the division is the unit of action, from the brigade to the division, we've got to get a level of mastery at the battalion and the brigade. Now what I can't give you is more time. But what we can do is go back to the old multi-echelon training. So we're going to continue to focus at this echelon where at the battalion level can you find means in order to continue to train to stress your staff CPXs, sim centers, whatever it may be, starting to understand and get a full appreciation for what are those capabilities that are out there and how do I employ them. Now I look at the lieutenants, I remember the basic course, even the advanced course, you used to have the old chalkboard. It's all electronic now and flying robots. But you used to put all your assets up there, REMBAS, whatever it was, and as you employed them, you scratched them out or you put a check so that you knew that you brought to bear everything within your capability against the enemy. We've got new we've migrated way far from there in this new multi-domain fight. And there's assets out there that we have to completely understand how to employ. What are they? Because if we don't know that they're there or how best to employ them, we're not maximizing the efficiency of our formation. So it starts with education, validation, and then we start moving off to execution. So for the lieutenants, the captains, the E6s, the 7s in the audience, we're not moving away from that echelon. You still got to win that first fight. That's what's expected. That's what's demanded of you. But as staffs, we need to migrate up and get our level of proficiency so that we are much more effective. And we're going to provide training capability for that. How you orient that for your multi-echelon training, we're going to have to work together to ensure that we achieve that. And that's one of the areas that we're going to assess. And in our commander-to-commander dialogues, that's some of the feedback that I'll be looking for, migrating up.
Hey, so thinking about battalion and brigade and thinking about all the travels I get to do in the past 2 years, going to the National Training Center and the Joint Readiness Training Center. Since I've been a Bravo team leader, I always thought about this, sustainment, all right? It's so important. Young company commander this last rotation down in at JRTC, was driving and his face was plastered in the JBCP, not paying attention. His driver drove through an obstacle and then Geronimo got him. This is a HHC company commander, mind you. It's like, hey, you know, what are you doing? How did you get captured, sir? What are you doing? It's like, well, you know, my face was buried in the thing and not paying attention. My driver was supposed to be on this road, but he was on the wrong road. So Geronimo captured him. So, I mean, who's taking care of the logistics of that company? And I asked him, I said, so, and the XO came out of the back of the truck too. It's like, oh, this is not good. The XO and the HHC commander in one spot, captured by Geronimo. I said, okay, there's no logistics happening. I said, where's your first sergeant? I don't have one. I'm like, whoa, I about had a heart attack right then. But think about this. He told me right there on the objective where he got captured, he's like, Sergeant Major, we rehearse the fight, but we never think about logistics. So, I mean, platoon sergeants, very, very important that you understand that you have to freaking ensure that you have beans, bullets, and all the stuff you have to actually execute the fight. Company commanders, platoon leaders. I mean, the fight's awesome, but if you can't sustain the fight, you're not going to be able to fight. I'm not just saying all this because General Daly's sitting right in front of me, but it's very important to understand in all this stuff that we're doing, all the things you're learning here at Fort Benning about how to fight, you have to remember how to sustain. So important. Because if we don't, it's like number 6 from what the Secretary of the Army said. We have to be able to sustain what we do. And we can't let ourselves in the fight outrun our logistics. So think about that as you're sitting here, but that's just something I share with everybody because every rotation, I make it a point to go visit our sustainment folks because not enough people do that. And then as you're setting up training, ensure that you're involving all your sustainment folks inside of your training so that way you can execute. And you know you're gonna be able to execute because you have gas to put in your tanks. Because in 72 hours, in 1 minute, a tank battalion becomes an infantry battalion. And I know, Sergeant Major Williams, you do not want to walk on the ground, you want to ride in your tank, right? Oh, sir.
So one of the key pieces, and I love that, especially with General Daly here as a team fight, is getting the sustainment brigade out in the field at one time as a division. And then really testing and stressing those lines. We talk about winning the first fight, but if you don't test every aspect of your divisional capability, you're gonna find out when you get down to the training center in combat, you're gonna find a couple of gaps. So find for the division commanders, for the Corps, let's find an opportunity to get everybody out there and then stress it. But for FORSCOM, and you can flip to the next slide as we're getting ready for the discussion portion. So we're focused on the future fight. We're building readiness in every formation so that we win that first fight of the next battle. And that's at echelon. And that's multi-compo. So compo 1 that's here, but I'll tell you, we have to make sure that we have our interoperability, both within the active, but with the Guard and Reserves. We have to continue to focus on our modernization. And part of the rearm plan is to focus so we can bring in the temporal nature of any fight, not just the fight tonight and win, but what does that fight of 2030 look like that we've talked about? It takes time to build that formation. Otherwise, you're going to fight with what you have today in 10 years, and it's just going to be a little bit more worn. But as identified, the demands on our forces continue to go up because the threats around the world require presence. So that's part of the balance that we are going forward with. And we are working with futures, we're working with AMC, we're working with TRADOC. So interoperability, modernization, and readiness are all interlinked. And that's what's affecting part of our rearm approach. And then when we turn to you and say, hey, I'm going to have to adjust part of the schedule because you're needed forward at this time, working with that formation so that we can find a new opportunity to bring forward the best equipment that's on the market.
So before we get to questions and discussion, thinking about standing up here and talking to everybody today is, so company commanders, future company commanders, read AR 600-20 and understand what your non-commissioned officers can do. Non-commissioned officers read that as well to understand what your roles are. But then platoon leaders, the first thing you need to do, it's going to be much to the chagrin of yourselves, is actually counsel your non-commissioned officer, your platoon sergeant. All right, because you have to give him or her that left and right limits. All right, and the understanding, but you understand that that platoon sergeant is going to train you and make you the next company commander. It's so important that counseling is the backbone, and use the AR 600-20 as a guide. But I'm looking forward to the questions, and I have to ask, is Second Lieutenant Hampton in the audience? Come down here. I'm going to talk about the Army family right here. Her dad worked with me in 1st Army. He was a lieutenant colonel when he got out of the Army, but young 2nd Lieutenant Hampton, guess who swore her in? Guess where she went to college, sir? He's the guy that you worked for a long time, much to your chagrin.
Oh, never to my chagrin.
Oh.
You talking about the chairman?
Yeah, Chairman.
Yeah.
General Milley.
What a great opportunity for him to swear her in. Crucible events of life.
Yes. I meant to give her a coin yesterday, but I didn't have one in my hand, so. Maybe the first question will get a coin if it's not scripted. I'm looking, if it's not scripted. I'm the Happy Star Major. There she is. Sweet. All right, so, ma'am, you have to be a success. If not, you're going to have to come back and give me the coin back. So, good. Yeah.
All right, we'll now move to questions. And while you guys are moving to the microphones to ask your questions, I'll ask the first one here for you, sir. So you highlighted the importance of synchronizing warfighting functions at echelon and some of the challenges that battalions and brigades have. What do you recommend company commanders can do to better support battalion and brigade operations? Over.
You said company commanders. So at the captain level, as you first come on to a staff, whether it's a battalion staff or brigade staff, you've been successful platoon leaders, obviously, lieutenants. But as you come onto that staff, take the time on the staff to understand what enablers are out there. I mean, it's an educational process. Now you're in there, and I know you're turning orders, you're doing tasks of the day, but it's also an opportunity to expand your intellectual aperture. And on the battalion, instead of just executing the task, and then I'm looking at the field grades too, it's an opportunity to coach, teach, and mentor. So as you're there, hey, here's what we're talking about. Here's what the multi-domain task force provides. Here's what the capabilities that you have to know, and it might make you write a paper. And I know everybody hates that, but you got to do it. So that you know exactly what you have in the inventory at your echelon in order to bring to bear on the enemy. So it's an educational process. It should be driven. It should be driven by the 3, the XO, and the commander. That's at the battalion. Brigade, you continue to expand that out a little bit. And I'd continue to build that knowledge base all the way out to you start getting into what you have in terms of a theater army at the combatant commander and even national assets. And, you know, I'll tell you, I learned that late. Brigade 3 was probably the first point where I got all that in. And that's when my eyes really opened up. If I can, and I did that as a commander, I'd drive that down earlier on so that you understand what that is. And also take the time, just as we teach in every course, what is the mission 2 levels up? If you know what your boss's boss is having to attain, especially if you're a battalion, you know, you're looking at the division, at the brigade, you're looking at the corps. If you know what the corps is trying to do, how they're trying to shape it, what are those transition points, then you start thinking in time and space. And now you've gotten to a much higher level of understanding of our profession. And if you can do that at the company level, the captain level, before you go into company command, you start thinking about at that echelon, then you're going to be in a much better position. You can be able to maneuver much more effectively and bring in all those warfighting functions that you're going to synchronize beyond just fire and maneuver. So that'd be my key at the captain level.
Thank you, sir. We'll now go to paddle 3.
Morning, Second Lieutenant Imami, able. With the Army moving towards a more division-centric model, and with the Army having brigade combat teams out on rotation in Europe, by 2030, might FORSCOM want to stand up a division in Europe to help combat the evolved security threat over there?
A new division, be honest, we just set up the 11th. Boy, you know, that you talk about a multi-layer discussion. Could a division be forward? Right now, it's a rotational basis. Some of the discussions that we have on posture, and you're looking at long-term posture. Remember, there's difference of philosophies, and the chairman, as these come forward, has been very specific. He doesn't believe on building long-term physical posture forward in terms of permanent presence. He does believe in the rotational nature of that. So he says, hey, look, we don't want to build housing, we don't want to build schools, we don't want to build PXs, and all that comes along with that, because those now become targets by the range. But he does believe in the rotational piece, and that's the narrative that he's gone forward with. Now, I do believe we're going to have that strata of headquarters forward. I mean, you've seen it today with the 5th Corps that's gone forward. They used to have a forward presence. Now we're looking, how do we man it so both it knocks and forward? The division that's forward, you got 2 divisions that are forward at this time. You know, is that sustainable in order to maintain that? Do we need that by the tasks that are being executed? And when you talk 2030, you know, what are the tasks that are going to be out there in 8 years? We know that we're going to have at least 1 division. And right now it's 1st ID rotating to 4th ID, and they're going to go over much thicker than they did prior to, obviously, the Ukraine. Part of the issue is, look at the strength and size of our Army. When you start talking about putting a division forward permanently, you know, this is the politics. You know, where are you going to take that division from? Are you going to take the 4th Infantry Division out of Colorado? You know, good luck with that, the 2 senators there. You know, and these are realistic issues and discussions that we have to have. So the capability may be forward if it is a permanent presence, or if it's a rotational presence. I think that's to be determined. But then it's also incumbent on that, the nation that's bringing them in, and you've seen that, and you've seen the yearning from a number of the NATO countries. Hey, we want full presence, we want brigades in our countries. Build out of the infrastructure in order to support that, so when they go forward, they don't just lose readiness. You still got to be able to train, you got to be able to have equipping, you got to be able to maintain it. And until that infrastructure is built out, you're certainly going to see a rotational capability, not permanent. You know, but you got 8 years to build it out. That's kind of the price of playing cards.
After spending 6 years in Germany, I always ask that question. Why aren't we back there? But yeah, fully understanding the nature of what the bosses want, I understand now. But as a young man, it's like, why are we leaving? Why are we leaving? Begrudgingly, but yeah.
It's good living too.
Yeah.
All right, for the next question, let's stay with Paddle 3.
Sir, Command Sergeant Major, thank you for being here. Captain King, MWFC. My question actually comes from you, Sergeant Major. You discussed this earlier. Recognizing the Russia logistical pitfalls that we've discussed throughout the maneuver conference or the maneuver warfighting conference throughout this week, what guidance do you have for future company commanders to avoid these pitfalls for our companies that we're going to lead in our platoons as well, to help mitigate that potential pitfall in a LISCO environment so we can maintain that fight?
So if I understand your, master question reference, logistical pitfalls in a LISCO fight as a maneuver commander. Yes? Okay. So again, the question, if you see what happened with the Russian logistical system, one, I think we've got a very different system. It's unfortunate that General Daly walked out. And this comes back to the distributed nature of our capabilities, getting the sustainment brigade out there and your support battalions underneath it, getting the full capability to push that out. It's got to be in a distributed manner, but part of that comes to us as maneuver elements too, is making sure that you're predictive in your requirements so that they can set up the normal rotational capabilities to go out there. It's also, and you can see that, and General Daly will talk about it, it's unfortunate, how do you protect his capability in order to provide that logistics forward? So I think the pitfalls that you talk about, that you saw, one, we've got a different capability, we got a different level of professionalism, but that doesn't mean the threats won't be the same. And again, predictability on our level, predictive logistics, then the distributed nature and the security of the ability for them to produce and provide it. What do you think of that? Is that good, Pat?
I think, so to answer your question from my perspective is, you have, as you counsel your first sergeant, they have to understand they're not a fighting first sergeant. They have to actually take care of that company. They actually have to freaking ensure that, you have bullets, the medics are in the right location, you have food, you have water. I mean, there's a lot of things, especially as a light fighter. And thinking about JRTC, and the ICV is a game changer for first sergeants now. I saw the last rotation of the Roxxons. They actually had these vehicles where they could actually tailor the load of the individual soldier, so that way when they get to the objective, they're not carrying 180 pounds and they're so smoked they can't even fight on the objective. So they're figuring out how to spread that line, actually use that vehicle to its advantage. But then you have to think about what you're doing. It takes repetition. You have to get out in the field and train this. All right, because I remember as a young platoon sergeant, I remember as a young first sergeant, I just wanted to go out and be in the fight. But then, you know, when I was kicking the door in Samara, Iraq, one of my platoon sergeants said, hey, first sergeant, we actually need you to be the first sergeant, not the #1 man. And I was like, that's good damn advice. All right, so I had to, you know, go back and rethink what I was doing, but to ensure that I was taking care of the company. So, you know, you have to tell them, you know, I know you want to be at the breach. I know you want to be doing this, but I really need you to focus on where my weak points are. And a lot of times is, if you're walking through the woods somewhere, you're carrying a heavy load, why didn't the first sergeant help think out something to where, you know, he could move that stuff forward for you to actually get up there on the objective, not be smoked and fight onto the objective. Does that make sense, sir? Thanks.
All right, for the next question, and when you're asking the questions, please speak up. It's hard to hear up here. So paddle 3 again.
Sir, Sergeant Major Captain Robichaud, Maneuvers Captain Career Corps. With the change from the brigade combat team as the unit of action to the division, how do you see us altering the current brigade-centric training to practice and train at this higher echelon?
As you start looking at the question, if everybody heard it, reference, we migrate from the brigade up to the division as a unit of action. You still have to be able to execute those tasks the brigade has done. And then you look at the training centers that we're a part of, your CTC rotations are going to look very similar to what we're asking the brigade to do. You still have to execute those metal tasks in order to support the divisional function. I think where I know, where you're going to start to see the adjustment when we hit the CTCs is incorporating the division headquarters more into the training. So as we train at echelon, now it's the battalion trying to support the brigade, and I talk about battalion outruns the brigade, getting that brigade to that level of proficiency, but now getting the division is going to have to become more of a player in the rotation itself. And then for the division, as you continue to train up, as you go to the field, you know, now a brigade will go out, you do brigade rotations, finding opportunities at the divisional level to get your TOC out there, to get your TAC out there, and work your staff functions in order to synchronize and, again, be predictive in the requirements of a TOC. And Jim, I'm looking at you, you just routed NTC. We're finding opportunities to do that now. We're going to pull the best lessons from that, and then we're going to solidify that in guidance. And there'll be rotations. Then we're also have to build a structure to support that rotation.